Yeah, we'll save that other shit for later. He's going to prove that we're in the end times.
Sweet.
But
oh yeah, remember this guy?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, this guy talked about how the Carolina Panthers would win the Super Bowl, and that was a sign of God or something.
Oh yeah, this ought to be good.
The genealogies in Scripture and find that from the time of Adam until today, there's been about 6,000 years. There's one period in the Judges that's a little ambiguous, so you have to give or take 100 years, but we've been on Earth since Adam about 6,000 years. And, that's 6 prophetic days.
Okay.
Like, look, we would be for sure on this if the chronology in Judges was more clear.
Well,
so we kind of have to give or take a couple hundred years, but about 6,000.
It's just presuming that even if there is a historic basis for the Adam myth, presuming that, which, I mean, let's just assume that they're talking about a people's, you know what I mean? Just we're talking about a historic period where people had just apparently started communicating, had started history keeping. That's not the beginning of the world, that's the beginning of that. That's like the first written word. It's not the beginning of everything. It's the beginning of when. It's like saying that nothing existed before you turn a camera on. It's absurd. It doesn't make any sense.
And I'm pretty sure we have written records older than that.
Oh,
I'm
we sure do.
Peter said, "The day with the Lord is 1,000 years."
Yeah.
Right.
And they really understood this.
Mm-hmm.
And some of those writings of the early church fathers, they would be clear about there will be 6,000 years until the end of this age. Jesus is the Lord of the Sabbath,
Like, even if I would lend credence to that, like, the God created the world in 6 days, and each day was 1,000 years, according to some verse Peter said, that was written thousands of years later. So let's take that and interpret the first part of the Bible with it, because the Bible is just some fucking convoluted, whatever.
Yeah.
But even that, like, the Earth, like, oh my God, we've looped back to planet forming. The Earth was not formed in 6,000 years.
Yeah, no, we can rest fairly well assured of that.
It's a bit of a longer process, guys.
Just prophetic day.
Just saying.
He wasn't talking about being the Lord of one day of the week. He was talking about the millennial day, the millennial 1,000-year period in which Jesus will come to earth himself to rule. And so we are.
What happens when this is just yet another debunked prophecy? Like let's say 200 years go by and for some reason there's still Christians walking the earth. Like, how do they justify this? Like, oh well, he'll come, he'll be here, just keep praying. Like,
yeah, that'll work.
To the timelines given in Scripture, somewhere near the end of the 6th day, and if you look at the first 7 days of creation prophetically, you see parallels during each 1,000-year period of man's history that you could see a metaphor for that in the days of creation.
Yeah, and the thing is, you can find a lot of references to future events in Nostradamus.
There's references to future events in pretty much anything.
Yeah, you can pretty much find them in Harry Potter at this point if you interpret the behavior of Voldemort and Harry Potter any way you particularly want to.
Voldemort will rise again, dude. Yeah, like H.P. Lovecraft said, when the stars align, gotta watch. He will rise out of the South Sea, so we really need to worry about that.
Yeah, we need to brace for that impact.
It's an amazing thing. But what happened at the end of the 6th day? God created man in his image, and I believe it's going to be at the end of the 6th day. By the way, when they in the New Testament said, we're living in the last days, they were...
Ironically, the quote he just brought up from the Bible is contradicted by the story of Adam and Eve when the rib is manufactured from Eve. You see, or the rib manufactures Eve. In the original Genesis story, he says God then created man and woman at the same time.
Yes.
And then it also says simultaneously that Eve was created afterwards from the rib of Adam.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's a famous contradiction.
It's immediate.
And that's also it's also weird to me, like created in the image, and it kind of lends more to like the misogyny of the Bible. Like, oh, it was because it was really man created in the image, and woman was just kind of this like afterthought, botched clone. Fuck you, woman.
We're talking about the last days of the prophetic week. They weren't talking about saying we're at the end of the age now. They were saying we're in the last days of this prophetic week. They knew it was about 2,000 years. Some of them even clearly wrote it, of the early church fathers, about the timing. But I believe...
I mean, you pointed out, though, that when the person who wrote Revelation, who we don't know, it's an anonymous author, but they were describing things that were happening during the time that it was written.
Yeah, there are several of these things that they call prophecy that are actually just historical events that they said at the time were proof that end times was happening when he wrote Revelations.
So I just don't really trust these people to have any kind of interpretation of future events.
Yeah, that's probably a good impulse.
I know it doesn't really need to be said.
Unfortunately, apparently it does. So,
created at the end of the sixth day, you're going to see the new creation man come forth at the end of the sixth prophetic day.
Okay, well, I kind of hope that's true. That'd be fun to watch.
That would be interesting.
I'd like to see how that panned out. Yeah, I'd like to see how that panned out.